go to Chat GPT, the AI algorithm, to ask.
Patrick, that seems so out of character.
Well, so Chat GPT said, we're at capacity right now. You can get notified when we're back. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Green Building Advisor Senior Editor Kylie Jacques.
Hello, everybody.
Professional builder and owner of Woodworks Homes, Sam Friesen.
Hello.
And our producer, Jeff Rose.
Howdy.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. It is great to see you all this morning. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
It's a delight.
Sam, it's a pleasure to meet you. We haven't met prior to just a few minutes ago. We've talked a couple times on the telephone, but Andrew's suggestion was to have you on the show, and I'm delighted you're here. Can you please tell us a little bit about what you do for a living and where?
Yeah, I'm delighted to be on. I live in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, which is about halfway between Minneapolis and the Canadian border. And I own a company by the name of Woodworks Homes. We're a design build, custom builder with our primary focus on residential. Relatively small company. There's 5 of us, and so we're able to get quite a bit of work done. But by no means are we production builders but one of our big focuses is on sustainable buildings, sustainable structures, and sustainable materials. And certainly the pandemic presented its challenges in pursuing that, and sometimes it gets to where you just got to get the project finished and moving forward. But this post COVID climate, I think, has just really led to a lot of really neat stuff happening across the country. We're trying to seize the opportunity to kind of create anew and expand what our activities are and some of our materials and wall systems that we're using.
So much so that you have decided, I'm guessing with some other folks, to organize a conference. Can you tell me just briefly about that? And we should mention that we're going to talk to you more in the podcast after show about the conference you guys have started and a little bit more about your business and some of the challenges of building in your very cold climate.
And well systems. I want to hear about that.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. So this last spring, as I grew up and learning about building and structures and, I would say building science, although I didn't think of it as building science at the time. One of the big influences was some of the early work of early builders, Steve Loken out of Montana, some of the stuff that was being presented on Bioneers. And this spring I was talking over family dinner and said, I really wish this kind of thing existed in northern Minnesota, maybe more than it does in our area. And it kind of dawned on me is that, this is something I need to do because I'm kind of that person in the position now. And I think it'd be a really valuable resource to have to bring together and share experience from a variety of fields, from engineers working on HVAC equipment to materials producers. And so we decided to organize the conference. I called it Inhabit. It's the kind of the name we came up with it. And its focuses on sustainable design and building, and with kind of a focus this year on low carbon materials, low carbon footprint, and we have some other topics in there as well. But that's kind of the underlying theme. So.
That's fantastic.
I look forward to talking more about that in the after show because I have so many questions. Right, Kylie?
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah, Sam, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Kylie, what have you been up to? You sent me a somewhat panicked message over the weekend. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, this is, I had an incident happen that was so scary, and it has led to a lot of information that I didn't know about. And it has to do with an Induction stovetop, a plug-in unit. It was a two burner unit that I had, and it exploded in a way that it was traumatic, quite frankly. I mean, imagine, like a glass chandelier over a marble floor in a foyer of a huge hotel. That's what it sounded like. It was horrifying.
And it
So
flung glass all over the place,
flung
right?
glass, hot burning glass. It was. I'm not kidding. If I had been in the room, I would have been seriously hurt. So thank God my cat was in the room and he did not get hurt. I couldn't believe it, but he came. Anyway, point being, I was so interested in what caused this, the science of it. So I reached out to all of my building science nerd friends and colleagues and got some
I can't imagine you have any of them.
I got some interesting feedback, and I just thought I would throw it out there because it's a timely topic. People are interested. In fact, Martin Holliday, not that long ago, wrote about this very kind of thing, the plug-in unit, hot plate essentially, but an induction unit. And prior to that, I hadn't really given them a lot of thought. It was like not something I was planning to budget for. Induction stoves are one thing, but like these little plug-in units, I think people are kind of interested in them. And so he wrote a review on it. I wound up replacing what I had with the unit that he himself tested out and had pretty positive things to say. And, anyway, the science behind induction cooktops is fascinating to me. And I learned a couple of things from GBA readers that I thought I would just quickly share because it's interesting science. Is that okay? Do we have time for that?
Of course.
All right. I'm just going to
Please.
go ahead and read like you do because I did a combination. I took a lot of comments, put them together. So induction stove cooktops work by creating, and this might be rudimentary for some listeners, but it was some information for me that I didn't know. They work by creating an electromagnetic charge within the cookware. So if some conductive metal in the kettle, this is what I was doing, boiling hot water. I should mention, this is important information. I had been using a kettle that was not rated for induction use because I didn't know you needed to use a kettle rated for induction use. These are the types of lessons, right? Who does, right? But so the reason for months it would take forever and ever and ever. The thing about induction units is that they heat very quickly. If you have a compatible pot, it also heats very quickly. But I didn't know this. I put my kettle on. I would turn it on. This is why I wasn't in the room. And I'd go hop back in bed while it heated up. And it would take forever. So there it is, my hot, my kettle on the heat. But this is where the information gets interesting. Let's see. So if there was some conductive metal in the kettle, if it had a base with a very thin ferrous metal layer facing the induction surface, it may get quite hot while not adequately transferring the heat via a non-ferrous layer above it to the water. This is the analogy somebody wrote, think copper core sandwich. That two-burner induction unit may not have what's called overheat protection, which this model that I have now that Martin recommended does have. So that's an important thing. If you're going to get one, make sure it has that. One of the readers wrote, my guess is there was enough steel around the rim of the kettle to convince the sensors that a compatible pot was on the burner. The rim overheated a small spot on the glass, making it fracture, which is interesting because now that I have a new unit, I have a pan that I thought was induction rated and compatible, but it won't recognize it. That's that protection. That's that overheat protection. It won't recognize the pot, so it won't turn on. So let's see, one last thing. Tempered glass, a subject I had never thought about. When they make tempered glass, the idea is to store a large amount of potential energy in the glass. So when the glass gets broken, the energy is released, fracturing the glass into pieces so small they are unlikely to injure anybody. It would be uncommon to find glass 10 or more feet away. That's not what happened here. I had large shards of, this is something different, but I thought it was an interesting side note.
We should tell folks, so if you break tempered glass, it breaks into these little tiny squarish pieces that are relatively unsharp and small. But you had shards of glass.
Unfortunately, I was in such a state that it didn't occur to me to take photographs of the thing. And I had said on GBA that, when I was soliciting opinions about what had happened, that glass had been embedded in the walls and floor. That was a strong word. Really, it was more like it temporarily adhered and I could wipe it off. But just to give you a sense of it, like it was a full-on blast and it went, I would say, 15, 20 feet all over.
I feel like you've done a valuable public service here,
exactly.
Kylie.
So here's the lesson. Here's the takeaway. You want to use only pots that are strongly magnetic at the base. There is a very noticeable difference, even in induction rated cookware, with respect to heat transfer and performance. This is,
So if I can paraphrase, what happened was your tea kettle was not sufficiently conductive. So
Right.
instead of transferring that heat to the water, it just got really hot, which then in turn heated up the glass until it blew up.
right.
Wow.
Yes.
Was it like a Pyrex type of glass, like a same as maybe like a ball canning jar or Tupperware type?
I can't answer that. I'm not sure. My guess is yes, because somebody
Because it
else
gets
wrote
hot.
in. It gets
Even
hot.
in the, when it's working correctly, I'm sure it gets hot.
Yeah. So, this is important information, I think. Somebody felt very strongly, this was an older unit. I didn't buy it. It came to me used. I'm not going to do this, but were something like this to happen, and somebody shared another experience on GBA that they had, it's worth considering reporting it to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, because I really could be in the hospital right now if I'd been standing over it. So
I've been watching Steve Lato, who is an attorney who practices law in Michigan, and he's talking about evidence. So you should have taken
take
photos. Yeah.
Right. I was in such a fright that it never even occurred to me.
Yeah. Well, then the whole topic of, training new users, for people that have kids that are, let's say your 12, 13-year-old goes and puts a pot on.
Sure.
It seems like there's a lot of training that needs to happen around these induction tops, as many as we're going to see come on the market here in these next several years.
Exactly. Yep.
And this is solvable, right? This is solvable. It just takes educating people. When my wife was a small child, grade school, they would light the gas range, right? Because they wanted to make oatmeal or whatever. And you learn how to do this stuff safely, right?
Yes, right. Yeah, that's the lesson. Learn about it.
What do you think about this, Jeff? Have you heard of this?
I've not heard of one cracking like that or exploding, but I've used a small induction burner, and you definitely have to pick the right pans.
Yeah, I wish I'd known. I should have known that, but not having used one, I didn't.
I think it's fantastic information to make sure you get one that has the overheat protection, because why don't they all have freaking overheat protection, right? It's like, that's too easy. You have a guest over. How the heck do they know what pots to use and not use?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So,
Jeff, any stuff going on? I know you've been traveling for work. What's going on with that?
I was up in Syracuse over the weekend shooting a Threads video, which was kind of fun and cool. And I love the parallels between sewing and woodworking.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah.
For instance, what we were shooting was on draping fabric and creating patterns, but like grain is paramount. You need sharp tools. You need, just the whole layout kind of process is very similar. It's a lot of parallels.
Huh.
Very cool.
That is cool.
I wanted to take my check-in time to plug the new energy retrofit project guide in the finehomebuilding.com. So if y'all are not all access members, that is something you want to definitely check out, because I think it's the first of its type. It's trying to answer many of the questions that folks have with regard to investments in their home as they relate to the tax benefits in the new American, Inflation Reduction Act, right? Yeah. So we're going to talk more about that, Sam, right, in the after show, because part of the Inhabit conference includes information on that very subject. Am I right?
It is. And it's a really big mystery right now, because the federal government, they have this large pot of money that's going to get distributed, but everyone's curious about how does it get from kind of point A to point B, and how do you pursue that process to make it happen? It's
so very much like the government to come up with the money before figuring out how to get rid of it. Yeah.
Those are fighting words, Patrick.
This comes from our friend Ross McPherson, who I worked with on Fine Homebuilding's AeroBarrier feature article, and who now works for the company that produces AeroBarrier. AeroSeal, which is in Dayton, Ohio. And Ross had some thoughts about our discussion or our question about improving the air tightness of an existing home using AeroBarrier. And here's what he had to say. Patrick, I would recommend engaging a HERS rater or have a mass save audit to evaluate the air leakage of the house as well as other energy-related areas. Mass save has many incentive programs for upgrading the energy features of existing homes. I'll put a link to Mass Save for those of you who can take advantage of their programs. Installing AeroBarrier before your furniture and belongings arrive is ideal. Flooring, cabinetry, and other finished surfaces would need to be covered during the install. So we're talking about if you buy an existing home, before you move in is the time to potentially do AeroBarrier if you're considering it. He says AeroBarrier is vapor open. Its perm rating is 21, so the sealant will not trap water vapor in a wall system. Since AeroBarrier is not a coating, a wall, and only filling gaps, a vast majority of vapor control is done through the wall materials itself, drywall, lather, plaster, etc., and not the AeroBarrier sealant. So he's saying it's going into the little cracks, not covering the inside of the wall in its entirety.
Yeah.
The question of drying capability is multifaceted, and many older homes which have not received adequate maintenance or replacement of materials at the end of their life cycle, the exterior siding may allow bulk water to access the sheathing. The typical lack of insulation in these older homes actually helps this scenario, as the heat from the home more easily reaches the sheathing and aids with drying. This wetting and drying process may have been occurring for decades without much, if any, material degradation. AeroBarrier will reduce the air leakage that carries some warm air into the wall cavity, and this may change the ability of the sheathing to dry from bulk water intrusion. Adding insulation to a wall assembly with bulk water issues will also reduce its drying capability. AeroBarrier is primarily installed in new construction and significant renovations, so the data is not as robust for existing homes, but the leakage reduction does have a significant impact on heating and cooling costs and the comfort of the home. If this was my home, I would resolve any bulk water infiltration issues if they exist at the exterior and have a qualified expert evaluate the design drying capabilities of the home before altering any components. I hope this helps. Best, Ross. Sam, what do you think about this? Is this the approach you'd take?
So one thing that always concerns me a little bit is anytime we're dramatically changing airflow in an existing house. I've seen from a number of remodels. I don't have experience with AeroBarrier specifically, but I do. We've seen houses that we've been called into where there is a large remodel done on a 40s or 50s house that had real poor vapor barriers and control layers, and where they remodeled half the home and then sealed those areas up, and then the previous section that was untouched is kind of left as was, and to the point where you have moisture migrating to the walls and icicles coming out of your siding of the house, and so it's definitely it's one
Especially
of those things that
what does the person on the other phone sound like when they have icicles coming out of their walls?
Yeah, yeah. So it's and it's usually that one was to investigate a couple of we were trying to figure out if there's like an air leak going into the wall or somewhere like that, and that was a little bit too before I had as much knowledge about the way some of these things work in these older houses, and I would say it's a AeroBarrier I think is like a good product to pursue for that, with maybe the caveat is proceed with caution. And certainly, if you do that, it should go hand in hand with a well-designed HRV or ERV, depending on which region of the country you're in.
I think this reader's question or this listener's question really speaks to the importance of prioritizing the 4 control layers, and there's a reason that they come in a certain order, right? Bulk water management being the first most important control layer. That's what you need, and then vapor, and then air, and then thermal comfort, or the thermal barrier. So
it's water, air.
Oh, excuse me. Right.
Yeah.
Water,
thermal,
air,
vapor.
Oh, I was told, but I must have this wrong then. I believe you over me, but I did think that thermal was last. Do you know?
Hey, I'm wrong often, Kylie.
Somebody. We
That's
need
how
to
we
look
have so
into
much
this.
content on this show.
I'm embarrassed that we don't have it down solid, but anyway, water's first. That we know.
Yeah,
and
and
I
then
think
air.
that
I think you got to have someone out there who knows what the heck they're doing to evaluate the house. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And make a
Absolutely.
plan. Yeah. When you don't make a plan, things go weird.
Yeah, if you're in northern Minnesota, you get icicles coming out of your side.
Right.
That's our theme. That's got to be pretty dramatic looking, I got to say.
It
I remember
is,
when I lived in Stowe, when it would get super cold, like 10, 20 below zero, we'd get this little buildup of frost around the lock set because that's a significant air leak. And of course, it's super conductive. So the ice can, build up on there. That was fun. This comes from a regular listener, Dave. Hey, podcast crew. I just listened to 529 and was glad to hear you talk about galvanic corrosion. Dave, you're my kind of guy. Anyone who's excited about galvanic corrosion, I would hang out with, totally. He says, as a young apprentice, I remember being taught about it in union school, and the next week having an opportunity to ask a plumber about it. He was running copper tubing through the punch-out and steel studs. I was curious if he worried about it. We were on the 12th floor of a very expensive downtown Chicago lakefront building. He said, F no! I think he didn't want to hear about it from a second-year apprentice. I said, okay. You would know, but if you don't mind, I'm going to ask my foreman about it. An hour later, when I came back through with the corridor, he was running his pipes through all the contact points where the copper touched the steel were covered in duct tape. I felt like I'd won some small battle and I didn't even have to snitch. I also wanted to point out that graphite, like in pencil lead, and zinc are quite far apart from each other on the galvanic chart. This is good to know when marking out flashing, especially mill finish flashing, but probably any metal flashing. I've had stubborn carpenters flat out refuse to believe me about this. I wrote a message on a piece of galvanized roofing metal and said it somewhere visible, and a few weeks later, after a couple decent rains, read it and weep was blazing in a rusty scrawl. I try to keep my crew supplied with extra fine point Sharpie pens when we're working with flashing or roofing. I wish I had a picture to share of that roofing panel. It convinces stubborn jerks that science is real, or at least that metallurgy is real. Some people, I tell you. Thanks as always for all your hard work on the podcast. Cheers, Dave. Dave, I had no idea that pencil lead and galvanized flashing were galvanic opposites. Did you know this, Sam?
Not specifically about pencil lead. I feel like I've seen it used. I've never experienced major corrosion from it, but in the past, our custom metal fabricator we work with has talked about, which fasteners to use with which products. And then some are particularly prone to it, such as copper and some of those more reactive metals. And so, yeah, it's a real, thing to be considerate of, and as well as the materials that can wash down onto it. I know he's talked about on his copper roofs, you have to be careful about what types of flashings and materials you put above those, because those can they wash down, sit on the roof, and then react with it as well.
Zinc, right? Specifically, things with zinc and copper don't play nice together, right?
Ooh, this makes me miss Matt Milham. He'd have all kinds of things to say about this. That's
Do you think
right
he's
up his
especially
alley.
interested in galvanic corrosion, Kylie?
Something tells me he is, or he'd know about it.
Yeah, I was sadly underinformed in galvanic corrosion, so I promptly Googled galvanic corrosion and found a nice chart that tells me when I'm in the red or when I'm in the green now. So I know I'm safe.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and chemistry is real. Who would doubt it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't read the whole. Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, I was gonna say one little takeaway is, I researched it a little more. I found is that stainless steel is actually listed as potentially corrosive against things that I didn't traditionally realize it was. They have it listed, with copper potentially and some of these other fasteners, I say Fourier fasteners. So I always just kind of assumed stainless steel was, a very inert material and you don't have to be concerned about it. It's what you go to if you have a corrosion issue, and that may not be the case. So.
I don't think it plays nice with aluminum either, which is, like gutters and other exterior elements, but I'm not totally sure about that.
What's the study of metals called again? Metallurgy? How do you say that word?
Metallurgy?
Yeah.
Cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I want to thank Kevin for sending us this amazing piece from the Boston Globe about Joe Blair, the refrigeration mechanic. Joe wrote this piece about his career, which started in 1982, and it discusses his how he got into the union and how much it means to his life beyond his livelihood. And I'm going to pick it up where I think I can reasonably get through it without wasting too much time of listeners. But we'll put a link to it on the podcast page. So those of you who want to hear Joe Blair talk about his life and doing trade work, I think it's the best testimony why you should let your kids give it a try, because for some people it is an amazing life and gives them great satisfaction, which is no small thing.
Yes.
Here we go. In 1982, a union refrigeration mechanic was pulling down $16 an hour. That was an eye-popping figure for a guy who felt lucky to have a job paying $4 an hour at Fletcher's Quarry in Westford, Massachusetts. My parents were friends with a service manager at a large HVAC company in Newton. I played tennis on his court, which was adjacent to his swimming pool. Between sets, he asked if I wanted a job. Now, I'm not offering you an apprenticeship, he said. It's just a job changing air filters. But listen, if you show up every day and work hard, we might sponsor you with a union. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but that's a career, a damn good career. I had just turned 20. I didn't care about a career, nor did I care about health care. Every job provided them then. It was a $16 an hour thing. That's what I cared about. That and proving to my father I could be worth something in this world. All I had to do was show up every day and work hard, and then maybe I'd get into the union. And then after 4 years of apprenticeship, I'd get the big dollars, make my father proud, and buy whatever the hell I wanted. Like a new thing I'd read about called a CD player. I had tried the college route for a year and a half, but I didn't want to be behind a desk as I had been for the previous 13 years. I wanted to be outside, move, drive around, actually do things. So I took the job with the HVAC shop in Newton, and my career as a refrigeration mechanic began. One of the dispatchers handed me a beeper, and when it beeped, I'd drive around till I found a payphone without the handset ripped off, scrounge a quarter from my coffee holder, and dial the office. As a changer of air filters, I was always on the move, picking up my order at Filter Sales in Charleston and then driving to the first business on my list so I could set up my ladder. I wore out more than one Aero Street Atlas trying to find my way around eastern Massachusetts, Charleston to Jamaica Plain, Alston to Somerville, to South Boston. Not only did I not know where I was going, I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never even handled a pipe wrench before. I remember one journeyman laughing at me. We went on a snowy rooftop somewhere in Brighton. I tried to loosen a 3/4 inch union by pushing a pipe wrench in the wrong direction. You know, he said, those things only go one way. See the teeth on it? You gotta pull them, see? So this goes on, and it is a fantastic story.
Well written,
It is so well written.
Yeah, I love, my favorite part is him talking about, like Patrick, you said, this goes so far beyond him earning his, salary. And he talks about the feelings that he has, like up on the rooftop, just being outside up on a rooftop, and how much he missed it when he took a break during COVID, and he thought, maybe I am done working, and ultimately he goes back, and because he
started to question his self-worth, right?
Yeah.
It was that important to his psyche
and
to be fixing things.
The value that he feels like he brings to people who are in need of his services. He has a unique skill set. I think I just recently had an Underwood typewriter restored for the third time, and people who have unique skill sets, it's like we really need to value them, and I think there's a lot of gratification in work that is hyper skilled.
Absolutely.
When I talk to folks about touch a trade, my current passion and albatross. I talk about you can love your job, but how do you know you love something unless you've tried it? And I firmly believe that we just need to expose kids and folks looking for second careers to a bunch of different stuff and let them find the thing they love, because it makes them happy and it's good for the planet.
Yes.
Absolutely, and we need more people that can fix. Just as it's one concern of mine is someone that both employs carpenters but works in carpentry myself is what happens in a future where maybe we have half as many of these HVAC guys as we used to, and
Right.
how do we keep some of this equipment maintained? But there's a tremendous amount of a tremendous amount of joy that goes with, as he described in the article, fixing things that where someone really truly depends on you to show up
Right.
and help them, and if you're not there, they can't fix it or they can't operate their restaurant, and it's a big deal. It's
And
a great service.
And it seems to me like as my underwood's like just an example of that. It's like as those technologies, HVAC technologies, get older, and the folks who know how to maintain them, fix them, get older. There's a point at which it's like you've got this machine, but you don't have the people who can work on them anymore. There's like a misstep there, so they become even more valuable.
The stuff that's currently being deployed in homes that's networked and super high tech, like,
Oh, can't even
who the
imagine.
heck is going to fix that stuff?
Right? The next generation. Yeah. Yeah, it's too complicated.
Well, I highly recommend Joe's Blair's piece in the Boston Globe. Like I said, I'll put a
Excellent.
link to it on the podcast page. I don't know if Boston Globe has a subscription model, but they usually give you at least a taste of the sauce. So I hope you read it because it's really good.
It is. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
We got some great questions as always, and I really want to thank the listeners of this show for sending in your questions because it makes us think and makes the show much better. So please, if you have any thoughts about what you hear on the show, or if you have questions, send them in. It's helpful to us and makes a better show.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, podcast crew, I'm looking for an inexpensive floor covering for a Oh my goodness, I'm just going to start over again. Hey, FHB podcast, I'm looking for an inexpensive floor covering for a third floor play space / art hobby area. I've thought about vinyl plank, tile, sheet vinyl, painted floors, commercial carpet. Do you guys have any thoughts? Well, this is a great question because we're talking about something that needs to hold up to a mess, right? And who wants to go first, Kylie?
Well, it put me in mind of, and I can't speak with any authority on this, but it did remind me of something that I wrote about years ago for the United States Green Building Council. Now, this company and the product are probably pretty geared towards commercial use, but this listener sounds like they're open to commercial use products. And so just check them out. The company is Interface, and they produce carbon negative modular carpet tiles, is how they describe it. And it's dyed nylon and high performance backing systems, all of which are carbon neutral, if that's something you care about. They have this like proprietary backing called Circuit Back Green, which is interesting to read about. It's made of a mix of bioplastics and recycled limestone fillers, and it absorbs more carbon than it emits it during the production process. But beyond all that, it seems like there's a very heavy duty product that comes in a lot of different styles and options and price points, and so just something to look at. Interface, seems like a worthy company.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because with the LVT products, there's a lot of information coming out that maybe they're not being produced in the most desirable way, and there's a lot
We
more
should tell
stuff on the
folks,
market
Sam,
that way.
LVT luxury vinyl tile, and this stuff is in utility spaces everywhere now, right? It's like the stuff you get at the home center, locks together typically, right?
Yeah, there's glue down, snap and lock, probably some other configurations, and some people call it LVT for tile, some people call it LVP for panel, like a panel looking product. But essentially it's a composite plastic that glues to the floor or clicks together.
I had it in my house very briefly. In fact, I bought it to install it in my bedroom and couldn't live with the stink. So I'm guessing
Oh, really?
that
It's
is
off-gas- it was
depends
kept
on what
off-gassing?
you buy, the
They
off-gassing.
do.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a Harbor Freight tool store, Kylie?
No, I have not, but I know the smell. I know the smell.
Yeah.
I can
That's the
smell it right here, right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the smell of solvents in
Yeah,
plastics.
most hotels
Yeah.
that you stay in Vegas have that smell.
That keeps folks spending money, right? It's like they think they're at Harbor Freight buying tools.
You're getting a great deal. Mhm.
So the
One thing
other
I
issue
do.
here is we need to make sure we don't make the last riser too high, right? So it has to be a thin flooring material, or you're going to mess up the rise sufficiently that you ideally should redo the stairway in order to have a safe stair without too much deviation between the riser heights.
Mhm.
So I like the
Yeah.
carpet for that
For that reason.
solution. Yeah.
Yep.
When I was reading it, I picked up on they say third floor play space, and so I wondered if there was going to be a bunch of kids. As a father of a 3.5-year-old, my suggestion might be paint the floor and then put in a nice floor when the kids are older.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and something I've seen too, where people have maybe some shop space, office space that's more utility, is they'll put down just a layer of plywood, like a thick veneer or even a 3/4 inch, and then just give it a light sanding and put a polyurethane or a stain in a polyurethane, and it looks nice and functions well for as long as you want, and then it's you just put whatever floor you want in the future over that. That's always a decent option as a transition into maybe not a fully finished floor point or floor finish if they want to do something in the future.
I don't think I've ever seen that done. Have you seen that,
That's
Patsy?
a smart idea.
Yeah, it is
You know,
smart.
I've always been a fan of vinyl composition tile, which is the stuff you see in commercial spaces. Oftentimes, 1 foot square tiles comes in amazing colors. But Sam's going to tell me, I'm guessing in the after show, that the toxicity of that stuff and the floor finishes that go on it would give you pause, or might give you pause, right?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of between off gassing and the way they get produced. There's a lot of information coming out about they do off gas a lot of chemicals that are potentially undesirable, and I think the brands are trying to catch up with that as much as they can, but I think it's a reality of any kind of synthetic produced product, and some species, I gotta imagine there's wood products too that, potentially off gas or, I always wonder, what is a whole house of cedar paneling? How does that impact your health? Does that have a negative
We need one of our
impact or
listeners
not?
with one of those indoor air quality monitors to monitor the VOCs of a cedar paneled space, right? I guess that would be off the charts. Yeah.
Huh. I never thought about that.
That's the delicious cedar smell. I think they're terpenes, right? Aren't they some kind
Right.
of? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Side
Oh my
note,
God.
I stopped by a builder's. I saw a builder working on an antique house, putting on a really thoughtful addition on a little walk I was on. And he had boxes of pre-primed cedar shingles on hand. And I asked him what they were going for. And he said $305. And it looked to me like maybe there were 60 shingles in there, maybe tops.
So that was for a box, and I'm guessing that's
A
like
box,
4
yes.
boxes per square. So that is insane.
Insane. He said it used to be
Insane.
$60. Yeah. So, side note over.
Wow. That's too bad, because it's like my favorite
know.
siding
It looks
material.
so
I love
good.
how replaceable it is. I love its texture. I love
Yeah.
how if you use natural products, you don't have to deal with. It's
And
tragic.
on a historic house, you need to match,
Yeah.
or you should. I mean, well, whatever. A lot of people want to. Let's put it that way.
One
Well, it
thing
would
I've
be a
always
crime to
wondered-
put vinyl on it, right?
Right. I mean, right. The options are there.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I've always been a little curious about, we've done some experimenting with, is using white oak and some other rot-resistant materials besides cedar. And one thing, white pine's another product that's been used forever up in the Northeast for siding and different types of paneling products. And it's one thing we've considered working with one of our local mills. And I don't know if anyone's got an experience out there, but has anyone experimented with, say, white pine shingles or shakes, or not for a roof but for a sidewall, or other species? I'd be curious how they performed and if that's a viable option as maybe a more budget-friendly alternative.
It's a great question.
Right, and to use a local material potentially instead of something that's coming from the Pacific Northwest to the Northeast, and even the white cedar shingles that you can get in limited quantities in the Northeast come from New Brunswick, as I understand it. So interesting. I hope we hear from folks who have tried other species for shingles. That's interesting. This is another great question. This comes from Will. Hey, podcast crew, really enjoying your podcast. I'd love to hear about replacement windows for old homes discussed. I know Dan Colbert said he would never replace single pane wood windows that are 100 years old, but what if you have 100-year-old plus house with 1970s single pane aluminum frame leaky windows? These are not worth fixing, so what do you do to replace them? There are more and more incentives to go triple pane, but what manufacturer do you use? It's difficult to put tilt-turn in these homes with no sheathing, so that leaves casements and picture window styles due to their lower U values. I'd love to hear specific recommendations discussed. Will, it's a great question. So someone has replaced the windows in your 100-year-old house with aluminum windows. What do you do now? And someone else go. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. So, one question I say when they say aluminum, I'm wondering if it's like, is it referring to like a remodeler window where it gets inserted into the existing trims, and or is it like a full, demo out the old unit and put a new one in?
I got to assume it was someone put an aluminum replacement window in the existing double hung windows, if I had to guess.
That was my impression. Which Fine Homebuilding has an excellent article on. Windows are a big mystery to me. I'm not going to chime in so much, but I will point people in this direction because it's really informative and gives you a good sense of the benefits of inserts or replacement windows versus full replacements. It's just how to choose the right replacement windows. It's an excellent article. I learned a lot. I highly recommend taking a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Sam?
Yeah, and I think anytime you can, I think, going to a triple pane glazing, even if it's a leaky house, that house still is going to be staying at, 65, 70 degrees. And I always, being from northern Minnesota, I'm always thinking, heat loads, maybe more so than AC loads. But yeah, it's you still have heat loss across that window, even if there's air leaking out of the house. There's still losses there, and that's actually a really good way you can make maybe a pretty good impact on an older home, because sometimes the walls can be challenging to retrofit.
I have a question about that because I feel like I always hear the opposite, which is it doesn't make any sense to put a triple glazed window in a leaky wall assembly. That really the better way to approach it would be to start with insulating and air sealing, and that the windows would come last, like in the order of priorities. I mean, a lot of people have that philosophy. I do know that. So what's your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at it like maybe like on a pyramid, if you have the house gutted out, I would say improve your insulation, especially if it's an old 2x4 frame. Improve your insulation. If you can get a thermal break, that's even better. But if you're replacing the windows anyways, or there's a problem and they have to be dealt with, go triple pane. And so it's kind of, I guess it depends where you are in the process, whether it's a big remodel or because certainly gutting a house, a lot of those had stucco, plaster finishes, or it's a fair amount of work to do a big deep energy retrofit on one of those houses, and
Sure.
not only the cost but the disruption to the person living there. So it's I think anytime you can improve the shell, whether it be through glazing the windows or wall system, it's good. Maybe it's just a matter of where your priorities are at that moment.
So would you ever consider like not triple glazed, but something lesser than high performance, but not to that extent? If you're talking about a crummy wall, like what do you want to go super high performance in a inadequate wall?
Yeah. So what I've been seeing is, so as we price these out on a couple different projects, I've been seeing that the triple panes are not, dramatically more. The brands are a little different, but we've been seeing maybe an additional $100 a unit to go to a triple pane glazing, which has when you kind of calculate out the paybacks and everything, it's not bad to have the additional thermal comfort and the the savings from the heat loss and some of those other just creature comforts that come with better windows. And certainly it would be worthwhile, I would say, if you're going through the effort to seal up that old existing cavity as much as possible. It can be quite challenging because a lot of times they have like the old lead weights in the sides for the double hungs, some of those. And and it may be worth, if you're going to do a window replacement, maybe you replace the whole unit and not just retrofit with a couple new panes of glass or a triple pane.
I was going to pick it up there because I think that let's talk about replacing the entire window instead of inserts. Like if your house is wood sided, that's easy. If your house is stucco, it's not. So I mean, I think it depends on what the exterior type is, and it probably makes it a lot of sense to go with a new window that has modern U factor, R factor measurements. But if you can't afford that, or it can't deal with the intrusiveness of that, I think an insert replacement window made of wood to match your existing wood windows would make a lot of sense. And to Sam and Kylie's point, like, there's a number of different considerations with windows. The wall performance is one thing, but sitting next to a cheap window is very cold.
Yeah.
And you can often really improve the comfort of a space by improving the performance of the window. So I would take all of these things into account when doing a metric on whether to replace them with an insert made of wood. Some of them are just sash, and they have a balance system that you put in with individual sash. Some of them come in a thin frame that's meant to fit in the existing windows, and you're going to have to go to a window showroom to see aesthetically what works for you. And I've heard installers say the sash packs, as I've heard them described, are a pain. They would much rather have the insert to install in the existing window as far as an ease of installation and reliability. So these are all things to talk about with your installer, and if you're going to do them yourself, go to the window showroom and have a look at these things, because it's going to be expensive. I think is the bottom line.
One of the takeaways that I got from that article that I mentioned was that installation, of course, I mean, is key in getting those inserts flashed correctly, and getting them installed correctly is not easy, right? Because you're trying to match up two different, something original and not original.
Jeff, you have thoughts about this?
No, one question I have is, where in the country are they? Because that I think has a bearing on it. Whether triple glazed makes sense, or whether you can get away with a good quality double glazed. And the idea that there are a couple of manufacturers that have casements that resemble double hungs, I think.
Will, it's a great question, and I don't think there are any easy answers. What I would say, though, is that there are a ton of replaced windows in houses, and they're likely moving toward the end of their lifespan. So it's going to be an increasingly common problem. I was so stymied on how to answer this question that I did what folks do now, which is go to ChatGPT, the AI algorithm, to ask.
Patrick, that seems so out of character.
Well, so ChatGPT said, we're at capacity right now. You can get notified when we're back.
Actually, that puts me in mind of Martin Holliday did a review of that in terms of, what does that software offer or AI offer for the green builder. It's an interesting read. It was that and another program. And he asked it all sorts of questions, and he shares, what it responded with. Some of it is just,
What did you
My-
feel about his observation, Kylie, with regard to Chat GPT taking our jobs as journalists? Do you think that's gonna?
I went back and forth about like, is this really what we want to be talking about? Like, I'm not worried. Let's put it that way.
You're not worried. I would be worried. I'm worried.
Really? I'm not. Not
But,
based on. That's not good enough yet.
Yeah.
My
It's just not
dream
good
as a
enough yet.
designer and builder is that someday I can just go on there and say, what are the applicable codes to
Right.
A, B, C, or D, and then it'll just tell me immediately versus
Yeah.
digging through my code books. And,
There's a lot of value to be had in that. It's like the next Siri. Right?
You all know I'm a student of the media. I have a communication degree, and of course this stuff fascinates me because what I imagine is this is mass media. This is the next mass media. If you can have a free computer like write reasonable content,
Well, that's the problem.
Why wouldn't companies do that? Right? It's cheaper than paying me and you, Kylie. Right?
Right? Yeah. But we're 50, so we're out soon. Sooner than later. By the time it gets that good, we'll be done.
yeah.
I'm hoping
It's interesting stuff. Yeah.
I'm
No
hoping
question.
it's a dig to get folks to sign up for Fine Homebuilding's all access or Green Building Advisor, right, Kylie?
Right, where real people work. Yeah.
This is something else that was funny on the Chat GPT landing page. Okay, it had a little thing and it said, it's talking to itself, which I find interesting. Write 2 truths and a lie about the status of Chat GPT. 1, Chat GPT is experiencing high traffic at the moment. 2, the developers are working hard to accommodate all users. 3, Chat GPT can predict the future with 100% accuracy. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Oh, boy.
Corey wrote to us. Hello, podcast crew. Corey from Roanoke, Virginia. Love your podcast and your continued stream of high-level information and education. On the thread about bathroom exhaust fans, the items to check on when flex duct is used is super now on my to-do list. Thanks.
Question mark. Thanks.
In my situation, I have a Panasonic Whisper exhaust fan set on 100 or 110 CFM and have flex duct. It runs toward the rafters and turns downward and exits through the soffit, various lengths depending on the bathroom location. During my energy audit, the fan was measured exhausting 35 CFM. Would it be better / preferred to change to something rigid and exit through the roof? Yes. My guess is it would increase the FM, but wondering if this outweighs adding roof penetrations. Thanks in advance, everyone. Corey, until pretty recently, I didn't even think there was like an approved soffit vent outlet for bath fans. Anyone else know about this?
It's
Yeah,
common for them to go through the roof, right?
In northern Minnesota, we find that if you send vent hoods or fans through the roofs, it causes a lot of melting and ice buildup, and can lead to other issues. We recently did a house that had a hipped roof, and so we didn't have any gable ends to go out with our bathroom fan, and so we have they're about a 12 by 12 square louvered device that when the fan kicks on, it just opens up and then it closes itself, and they seem to work really well. So I think there's good products out there. With that said, as you mentioned, it really depends where you are in the country too. If you're somewhere that doesn't have a tremendous snow load or cold issues, through the roof might be a great option.
Is it trickier to detail something through the roof than it would be, say, through the soffit
Maybe you don't have
to get right?
issues with water going in, but it's not difficult. We do it all the time with plumbing
Yeah.
vents and all sorts of other stuff, so it's not a problem.
It's a sequencing problem, right? That's the issue, is like getting the HVAC tech or electrician who's ever installing the bath fan and whoever is responsible for putting the outlet up and the roofer at the right time to do the work so it's sequenced correctly, and it's a pain. I'll put a link to a soffit vent that is actually effective, and it's a relatively new product, and I think it's at a minimum that's what I would do, because my understanding is that the strategies for venting through a soffit can be pretty hayseed. So I would say straighten up the flex duct, make sure that it's zip tied, both the inner liner and the insulation layer, and run it as directly as you can from the fan to the outlet to minimize static losses.
GBA has a bunch of great posts on that very topic from Allison Bales for how to do that. Tighten up the flex duct inside and out.
It sounds like that to have that big of a drop, unless they have a really long run, it does sound like maybe there's a kink in the line somewhere.
I was surprised to learn how many Panasonic fans are installed with tape holding the damper shut. That is something I would check too, Corey, because for whatever reason they tape them shut, and like the person who installs it forgets to pull it off.
I haven't looked for this on GBA, but do you recall, Patrick, if there's a Fine Homebuilding article or GBA article on testing your bath fans, like how well they're working, or like. I'm just curious about that process. Like, I guess I tend to trust in these things. If they're on, they're working, but that might not be true. And I'd like to know. So I need to do a little research, but has that been a topic that you've discussed before?
The traditional test is to take a square of toilet paper.
No, not that. I'm talking beyond that. Yeah.
So you need a flow hood, right, Sam?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. They make them. It's a big hood that goes over it. There's a couple of different designs, one that counters the pressure, one that measures flow. But, that's something that Northern Built Pro, Randy Williams, he's in our same area, but he's written on a few articles on. And
I need to look it up.
It's a good way to, it's a good way to commission your fans. And, if you have a long run of flex duct that just got put in, it might be good to check, make sure your plumber did their job right, so you don't have to crawl around in the attic. So.
So, Sam, we should remind folks, we're going to talk a little bit about your business model, the kind of projects you take on, the kind of clients you work for, and talk about the Inhabit conference in the after show. And it should be a good conversation, right?
Yeah, I'm excited for it. And a lot to talk about. So.
Briefly, so I wanted to bring up that the New York Times had a piece that mentioned the International Builder Show and the prevalence of tiny homes as a possible solution for our country's housing crisis. And I don't know what builder show they went to, but the builder show I went to didn't have a lot of tiny home stuff there, but they did have some model homes on display. But it seems like most of the stuff was targeted to maxi homes, not tiny homes. So,
Patrick, I wondered if that was your impression. And I will say, when I read that article, I didn't come away with, I think tiny homes says something very specific. And I think what they were trying to say is that there was more of an emphasis on smaller home building, not specifically tiny homes, and ADUs, which we've talked about in the past on the show, and just a smaller footprint, somewhere in the 2,000 square foot range. That was my impression that this journalist came away with that impression that was underlying a lot of the conversation at the show, but you didn't find that?
No. I mean, yes, ADUs they had outside, and modular ADUs, of course, because, they're in a parking lot and brought from outside. But yeah, they had a few homes there. Like the builder show was like the builder show always is. It's about huge business. It's selling building products. It's huge business.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever been, Sam?
I have not yet been out there. It's always just midweek travel. It seems like I always get pulled away by some kind of a work thing I'm taking care of. But I agree that I think I don't know, maybe if I'm a big advocate of tiny homes in terms of mass producing a housing shortage, needs for that. But certainly, I think we need to maybe look at more modest homes. That under 2,000, under 1,500 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, couple living rooms, comfortable spaces, but not behemoth.
Right.
Kylie, right? My takeaway too was that for the first time in a long time, the average size of American homes has shrunk by a few hundred square feet. So that's telling. Yeah,
That's a good thing. Yeah, in my opinion.
it's still big though. It was like still 2,300 square feet plus. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, over the years, I've had a chance to look at a tremendous number of floor plans, and one thing that always surprises me is I think the other caveat is a well-designed home.
Yeah.
Because you see a lot of homes where they might be 2,000 square feet, but it feels like you're living in a very small space because everything lays out poorly, and there's walkways through everything. So
And conversely, if it's well designed but small, like my little space that I'm in is less than 300 square feet, and I feel perfectly at ease in it, because the light's good. That makes all the difference. I think there's, like you said, design has a lot to do with it, how it's laid out, and if it feels spacious and doesn't have to be a lot of room to feel comfortable.
absolutely.
Well, it was a great podcast, team. Thank you.
Yeah, that was fun.
All right. Well, stay tuned for the All Access podcast after show. We're going to talk to Sam about his business and the challenges of building in, I forget what the listener, a frozen wasteland of northern Minnesota was how someone described it who listens to the show. So
fair enough.
I think that's unfair, but it's pretty funny. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Sam, Kylie, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. People, review us, please. It really does help. And some of the reviews are getting kind of old. So if you could help us out, I would be super grateful. Stay tuned for the after show. Thanks very much for listening.